Right now, the average hand knitter working continental style produces somewhere between 20 and 40 stitches per minute. But in 1889, a woman sitting in her parlor in Leicester, England, cranking a cast iron machine no bigger than a kitchen stool, was producing over 600 stitches per minute. She was making a complete pair of stockings, heel turn included, toe grafted shut in under 3 hours. And she was doing it with cotton yarn that most modern knitters would throw across the room in frustration because it has zero stretch, zero forgiveness, and splits if you even look at it sideways. That woman was not a factory worker. She was not an industrial laborer. She was a hobbyist. She bought her machine from an advertisement in a magazine, the same way you might click on an ad today. And the machine she was using, the circular sock machine, is a piece of Victorian engineering so elegant, so brilliantly designed, that the basic mechanics have not changed in over 130 years. The modern versions you can buy today, some of them 3D printed, operate on the exact same principles as the originals from the 1800s, same latch needle system, same cylinder rotation, same gravity-fed yarn tension. The Victorians solved this problem completely, and then we forgot. We forgot because the 20th century happened. Mass manufacturing moved overseas. Knitting became a hobby instead of a household necessity, and when it became a hobby, we romanticized the slowness. We started treating the meditative pace of hand knitting as the point rather than the limitation. And look, I love hand knitting. I'm not here to take that away from anyone. The rhythm of needles, the portability, the mindfulness of it, that is real and that is valuable. But if you have ever sat down to knit a pair of socks and thought to yourself, I love these, but I cannot keep making them at this pace, or if you have ever wanted to produce enough knitted fabric to actually construct a full garment, a corset cover, a cardigan, a pair of proper Victorian stockings that go above the knee, and you looked at the math and realized it would take you 200 hours, then you need to hear what I am about to tell you. The circular sock machine is not cheating. It is not a shortcut. It is a different discipline entirely, and it is the single most underrated tool in the entire fiber arts world. But here is what nobody warns you about. The machine will humble you before it rewards you. And I am going to walk you through exactly how that humbling happens, step by step, failure by failure, so that when you sit down at your own machine for the first time, you are ready for every single thing it throws at you, because the failures are not obstacles, they are the curriculum. Let me explain exactly how this machine works first, because the engineering behind it is genuinely brilliant, and understanding the mechanics will help you understand why each failure happens and what it teaches you. A circular sock machine, or CSM, is built around a vertical cylinder. That cylinder has a ring of latch needles arranged in a circle, pointing upward. When you turn the crank handle, a cam system pushes each needle up and then back down in sequence as the cylinder rotates. On the way up, the old loop of yarn slides down the shaft of the needle and the latch opens. The yarn carrier lays a new strand of yarn across the open hook at the top of the needle. On the way down, the latch closes over that new yarn, the old loop slides off over the closed latch, and you have a new stitch. That is one stitch. One single stitch formed in a fraction of a second. Multiply that by the number of needles in your cylinder, 60, or 72, or 84, depending on your gauge, and one full turn of the crank produces an entire round of knitting. One turn, one round. Think about that compared to hand knitting, where you individually manipulate every single stitch with both hands. Now here is where the physics gets interesting. The reason this machine produces such consistent, even fabric is because every single stitch is formed with the exact same tension, the exact same loop size, and the exact same yarn path. When you hand knit, your tension varies. It varies from stitch to stitch, from row to row, from the beginning of your session when your hands are fresh to the end when your hands are tired. This is not a criticism. This is biomechanics. Your fingers are organic structures controlled by muscles that fatigue, tendons that tighten when cold and loosen when warm, and a nervous system that changes your grip pressure based on your stress level, your hydration, even how much caffeine you have had. A machine does not have any of those variables. The cam is the cam. The needle is the needle. The stitch is the stitch. Every single time, this means the fabric produced on a CSM has a structural uniformity that is almost impossible to achieve by hand. And structural uniformity matters enormously. When you are making something that needs to fit the human body, a sock, a stocking, a fitted sleeve, the places where hand-knitted garments most often fail, where they stretch out unevenly or wear through prematurely, are the places where tension inconsistency creates weak points in the fabric. One stitch that is slightly looser than its neighbors will bear more of the load when the fabric is stretched. It will abrade faster. It will pill first. It will break first. A machine-knit fabric distributes load evenly across every stitch in every row because every stitch is identical. So the engineering is sound. The physics is on your side. The machine is brilliant. Now let me tell you what happens when you actually sit down and try to use it for the first time. Because the gap between understanding how a CSM works and actually producing a wearable sock on one is where most people either push through or give up. And I do not want you to give up. I want you to know in advance exactly what is coming so that when it happens, you recognize it, you understand why it is happening, and you keep going. The first thing that will happen is you will thread your yarn. You will set your tension. You will carefully follow whatever cast-on tutorial came with your machine, and you will start cranking. And fabric will appear. It will come out the bottom of that cylinder like a magic trick, and you will feel a rush of excitement. That is hard to describe unless you have experienced it. Actual knitted fabric, emerging from a machine you are operating with your own hands. After maybe 15 minutes of setup, you will think this is the greatest thing ever invented, and then something will go wrong. Maybe you threaded the wrong end of the yarn, the tail end instead of the cone end, and you run out of yarn 3 inches into your tube because you were knitting from a strand that was only a foot long. This sounds like a ridiculous mistake. It is a completely normal mistake. It happens because you are excited and you are focused on the mechanics of the cast-on, and your brain shortcuts past the basic question of which end of the yarn is attached to the supply. You laugh at yourself. You rethread and you start again. That is failure number 0. It does not even count. It is just your initiation fee. The real education begins with your first completed sock. You will follow the tutorial carefully. You will cast on, knit the cuff, work down the leg, turn the heel, knit the foot, decrease for the toe, and remove the sock from the machine. This will take you somewhere around 2.5 hours of focused, dedicated concentration. You will be tired. You will be proud. You will hold up a sock and think, I did it. Then you will try it on, and it will be too big. This is where I need you to pay attention, because this failure is not about the machine. This failure is about a fundamental concept in textile engineering that most knitters underestimate. It is called ease. Ease is the difference between the actual measurement of your body and the measurement of the finished garment. Positive ease means the garment is larger than your body. Negative ease means the garment is smaller, which in knitted fabric means the fabric is stretched to fit. Socks need negative ease. Your sock needs to be smaller than your foot and ankle so that the natural elasticity of the knitted fabric grips your leg. If you calculated your stitch count based on your actual measurements without accounting for negative ease, your sock will be too big. It will slide around on your foot. It will bunch at the ankle. It will feel like you are wearing a knitted bag instead of a sock. And here is what makes this mistake particularly sneaky on a CSM. The machine knits so fast that the error compounds across hundreds of rows before you have time to notice. By the time you hold up a finished sock and realize it is too large, you have already invested 2 hours of work. With hand knitting, you might catch a sizing issue after a few inches because the pace gives you time to evaluate as you go. The CSM does not give you that luxury. It rewards preparation and punishes guesswork. So your first sock is too big. You did a tension swatch. You tried to do the calculations correctly, but you gave yourself too much positive ease and too much length. This is normal, this is expected, and it teaches you the single most important lesson of CSM knitting. Trust the math, not your instincts, not your eyeballs, the math. Now here is what most people do next, and it is exactly what you will be tempted to do. You will overcompensate. Your first sock was too big, so you tighten your tension, switch to thinner yarn, recalculate for a smaller circumference, and crank out sock number 2. And sock number 2 will be too small. You swung the pendulum too far in the other direction. This is also normal. This is also expected, and it teaches you a second critical lesson. Adjustments on a CSM must be precise and incremental. A small change in tension or needle count multiplies across every single stitch in every single row. On a 72-needle cylinder knitting 60 rows for a sock leg, that is over 4,000 stitches. A tension difference that changes each stitch by a fraction of a millimeter adds up to centimeters of total difference in the finished fabric. You cannot eyeball it. You have to measure, calculate, and trust the numbers. Your third sock is going to be the one that really stings. Because your third sock, if your experience follows the pattern that nearly every CSM learner goes through, will be the right size. The gauge will be perfect, the foot will fit beautifully, and it will fall apart. It will fall apart because of the hem. The hem on a CSM sock is not decorative, it is structural. When you cast on and begin knitting, the first several rows of fabric are unsecured. They are just loops sitting on needles with nothing anchoring them from below. The hem is the process of folding those initial rows back up and hanging them on the needles so that the cast-on edge is locked into the fabric. If you hang the hem incorrectly, if you skip a needle, if the tension is uneven, if you rush through it because you have already done this twice, and you think you know what you are doing, those unsecured rows will unravel. Not immediately, not while the sock is on the machine. Later, when you take it off, when you wash it, when you wear it, the sock will eat itself from the top down. One row releasing the next in a cascading failure that turns your perfectly sized, beautifully knitted sock into a pile of curly yarn. This is the failure that makes people quit. The first sock being too big is funny. The second sock being too small is frustrating. But the third sock, the one that was finally right, falling apart because of something you did not even realize was load-bearing, that is heartbreaking. And I am telling you about it now in detail so that it does not break your heart. So that when you sit down to hang your hem, you treat it like the most important structural element of the entire sock. Because it is. The hem is not a finishing detail. The hem is the foundation. It is the thing that holds everything else together. Treat it with the same respect a builder treats a foundation pour. Slow down, check every needle, make sure every loop is seated properly. Do not rush. The 30 extra seconds you spend on the hem will save you 3 hours of heartbreak. Now let me tell you about sock number 4. Because sock number 4 is where everything changes. Sock number 4, you have been humbled. You understand ease. You understand incremental adjustment. You understand that the hem is sacred. You sit down, you do your tension swatch, you wash it, you measure it. You calculate your stitch count with proper negative ease. You cast on carefully. You hang your hem like your life depends on it. You knit the cuff, the leg, you turn the heel, you knit the foot, you decrease for the toe. You remove the sock from the machine. You graft the toe with Kitchener stitch. You try it on, it fits. Not approximately, not close enough, it fits. It grips your ankle, it cups your heel. The toe sits right where it should. The fabric is smooth, even, uniform, every stitch identical. And you made it in 2.5 hours, and it will not fall apart. Sock number 5 is the match, and now you have a pair. A pair of socks that you made yourself, on a machine that uses the same engineering principles as the ones Victorian women operated in their parlors over 130 years ago. And you will not want to take them off. You will wear them around the house. You will show people who did not ask to see them. You will immediately start thinking about making more pairs, in different yarns, in different colors, for people you care about. And this is the moment where the CSM stops being a sock machine and starts being something much bigger. Because once you have made 5 socks, once you have failed and understood why you failed and succeeded because of what the failures taught you, something clicks in your mind. You realize this machine does not just make socks. It makes tubes, it makes flat panels, it makes shaped pieces, and any knitted garment in the world is just a combination of tubes, flat panels, and shaped pieces. Chunk 2, that realization is the door to everything that comes next. And what comes next is over 100 years of forgotten patterns waiting for you to rediscover them. The Victorians did not see the CSM as a sock machine. They saw it as a home textile factory. The pattern books from the 1890s through the 1910s read like complete garment catalogs. Corset covers knitted in fine cotton. Fitted sweaters constructed from panels produced on the machine and sewn together. Cardigans with shaped fronts. Vests, caps, scarves. Mittens, gloves with individual fingers. Bags and reticules. Baby garments, even underwear. One machine, one operator, one crank handle, and an entire wardrobe. Those pattern books still exist. Many of them are freely available as digital scans through university libraries and fiber arts archives. And here is the part that will make your jaw drop: the instructions. In those books work on modern machines. A pattern written in 1895 works on a 3D printed CSM built last year. That is how robust this engineering is. That is how thoroughly the Victorians solved the problem of domestic textile production. The fundamental mechanics, the latch needle, the cam system, the cylinder rotation, have not changed because they did not need to change. The design was right the first time. Now I promised you I would explain why Victorian knitters could make things with cotton yarn that modern hand knitters struggle with. And this is where the materials science becomes fascinating. Today, the sock yarn market is dominated by superwash merino blends, superwash merino nylon, superwash merino silk, superwash merino everything. Superwash yarn is convenient. You throw it in the washing machine and it does not felt. But superwash treatment is a chemical process that strips the outer scale layer from wool fibers, and that scale layer is what gives wool its natural elasticity, its moisture management, its structural memory. Superwash wool stretches out faster, pills more readily, and wears through sooner than untreated wool. The Victorians did not have superwash. They did not need it. They understood something about fiber that we have largely forgotten. They understood that the twist of the yarn and the structure of the knitted fabric are what determine durability, not chemical treatments applied after the fact. Victorian sock yarns were typically 3-ply or 4-ply constructions with a firm twist. That firm twist packs the fibers tightly together, reducing the surface area exposed to abrasion, which is what causes pilling and wear. The plying itself adds structural integrity because each ply supports the others under load. This is the same engineering principle behind braided steel cable. When you knit that firmly twisted, multiply yarn on a machine that produces perfectly uniform tension, you get a fabric that is dense, smooth, and extraordinarily durable. Victorian machine knit stockings were expected to last for years of daily wear with regular darning. Not months, years. Cotton was also widely used, particularly for summer stockings and for people who could not afford wool. Cotton has no natural elasticity, which makes it notoriously difficult to hand knit into fitted garments. It stretches out and stays stretched. But on a CSM, the uniform stitch tension compensates for cotton's lack of memory. Every stitch is pulling with the same force, which means the fabric maintains its shape far better than hand-knit cotton. This is why the Victorians were able to produce beautiful fitted cotton stockings on their home machines. While modern hand knitters often struggle with cotton socks that bag out at the ankles after one wearing, the machine solves the problem that the fiber creates. The yarn you choose matters. The twist of that yarn matters. The tension at which it is knitted matters. And a CSM gives you control over that tension variable in a way that your hands simply cannot match. This is not opinion. This is material science. The structural behavior of a knitted fabric is governed by loop geometry, yarn properties, and interloop friction. A machine standardizes the geometry. You choose the yarn. The fabric quality follows from those two inputs as predictably as a recipe follows from its ingredients. Now I want to address something that I know some of you are feeling. Some of you are experienced hand knitters, and the idea of a machine makes you uneasy. It feels like cheating. It feels like it cheapens the craft. I understand that feeling completely. And I want to offer you a reframe that changed the way I think about this entirely. A CSM does not replace hand knitting. It complements it. Hand knitting is for portability, for meditative focus, for lace and cable patterns and intricate color work that would be extraordinarily complex. On a machine, a CSM is for volume, for consistency, for projects where you need a lot of plain stockinette or ribbed fabric. At a reliable gauge. The Victorians did both. They hand-knitted lace shawls in the evening and cranked out stockings on the machine in the afternoon. They did not see these as competing activities. They saw them as different tools for different jobs. And here is the part about speed that matters more than raw numbers. It is sustainable speed. Hand knitting for 12 hours puts enormous repetitive strain on your hands, wrists, and forearms. Carpal tunnel syndrome, tendinitis, de Quervain's tenosynovitis. These are real conditions that end knitting careers. Cranking a CSM uses completely different muscle groups. You are turning a handle with your dominant hand and managing yarn tension with the other. The motion is rotational rather than the fine motor pinching and wrapping of hand knitting. The fatigue is in your arm and shoulder, large muscle groups that recover quickly, rather than the small tendons and ligaments of your fingers and wrists that are vulnerable to chronic injury. This means you can produce more knitted fabric over a longer period of time without damaging your body. For someone who wants to knit seriously, who wants to produce garments and gifts and functional textiles at a meaningful volume, that is not a small consideration. That is a career-extending, hobby-preserving advantage. Now let me give you the exact steps to get started, because I promised actionable advice and I do not break promises. First, you need a machine. There are three main options. Vintage machines from the late 1800s and early 1900s, found at estate sales and specialty dealers. These are beautiful, functional, and expensive. Restored vintage machines from specialty rebuilders who take old frames, replace worn parts, and tune them to working condition. These are reliable and come with support. And modern machines, including 3D printed models. These are the most accessible entry point. They are lighter, often less expensive, and they come with manufacturer tutorials designed specifically for beginners. The stitches are identical to what a cast iron machine from 1890 would produce, because the mechanics are identical. Start wherever your budget allows. The machine does not need to be antique to produce antique quality results. Second, you need yarn. For your first socks, use a standard fingering weight sock yarn with at least 20% nylon content for durability. Avoid pure cotton for your first project because cotton has no stretch and will punish every tension inconsistency while you are learning. Avoid anything fuzzy or hairy like mohair blends because the fibers will catch on the latch needles and cause jams. A smooth, firm, plied sock yarn is what you want. Solid colors or long gradient colorways are easiest because they let you see your stitches clearly. Save the speckles and variegated yarns for after you are comfortable with the machine. Third, learn to cast on and do not improvise until you have done it right at least 10 times. The cast on is the single most important skill on a CSM. If the cast on fails, nothing else matters. Follow your specific manufacturer's instructions exactly. The first few rounds are fragile. Go slowly. Watch for any needles that are not catching yarn. A dropped stitch in the first 3 rounds will cause a run that destroys your entire piece. Fourth, knit a tube of at least 30 rounds. Remove it from the machine. Wash it exactly the way you plan to wash your finished socks. Let it dry flat. Measure your gauge. Stitches per inch around the circumference and rows per inch along the length. Do the math. If the numbers say your sock should be 64 stitches around and your machine has 72 needles, you need to change your yarn, change your tension, or change your cylinder. Do not skip this step. Do not eyeball it. Do not assume it will be fine. Remember what happened to sock number 1. Trust the swatch. Trust the math. Fifth, when you hang the hem, slow down. I have already told you why. I am telling you again because it matters that much. The hem is the foundation of your sock. Check every needle. Make sure every loop is seated properly. 30 extra seconds here saves 3 hours of heartbreak later. Sixth, learn the heel turn. The heel is where CSM knitting becomes true sock making. You switch from circular knitting to back and forth knitting on a subset of your needles. You push selected needles out of work, knit across the remaining needles, then reverse direction. Each row, you bring one more needle back into work until the heel cup is formed. Then you rejoin for circular knitting and continue down the foot. This is conceptually identical to turning a heel on double-pointed needles. The geometry is the same. The execution is just mechanical rather than manual. Seventh, master the removal. Getting your finished sock off the machine cleanly is a skill unto itself. The standard method involves transferring stitches in a specific sequence, and then cranking one final round that drops all the stitches off simultaneously. Done correctly, you have a live edge at the toe that you graft shut with Kitchener stitch. Done incorrectly, you have a pile of yarn that used to be a sock. Practice on your swatches first. Eighth, count your rows. A CSM with 72 needles produces 72 stitches per crank revolution. If your pattern calls for 30 rounds for the leg, that is 30 revolutions. It is very easy to lose count when you are watching television or listening to a podcast. Use a row counter or make a mark on paper every 10 rounds. Ninth, clean your machine regularly. Lint builds up in the needle slots and around the cams. That lint changes how the needles move, which changes your gauge, which changes your sock. A small brush and compressed air after every few socks keeps everything consistent. 10th, and this is the one that will change your entire relationship with this craft. Once you have your first successful pair on your feet, go find the Victorian pattern books. Look for titles from the 1890s through the 1920s. Many are available as free digital scans. The language is old-fashioned, but the instructions are precise and thorough. These books were written for home knitters with no formal training, which means they explain everything in plain, step-by-step language. And the projects in those books will stagger you. Corsets, sweaters, cardigans, vests, hats, bags that look like fine reticules from a period drama. You went from making socks to having access to an entire, lost tradition of garment construction. Remember, the sock was never the destination. The sock was the master class in disguise. It taught you tubes, flat panels, shaping, short rows, decreasing, and structural finishing. Every technique you need to make those Victorian garments. You already learned making 5 socks. You just did not realize you were learning it. Here is what your timeline looks like if you start today. Week 1, you unbox your machine, set it up, learn the cast on, and make your first tube of practice fabric. You will probably knit the tail end of the yarn at least once. You will laugh at yourself and start over. By the end of the first session, you will be producing stockinette in the round. Week 2, you do your tension swatch, wash it, measure it, calculate your stitch count, and make your first sock. It will be too big. You will understand why. Week 3, you adjust and make your second sock. It will be too small or have a different issue. You will understand why. Week 4, you make your third sock with corrected calculations and careful attention to the hem. If the hem holds, you have your first wearable sock. If it does not, you now know that the hem is where your attention needs to be, and your fourth sock will be the one. By the end of month 1, you will have a pair of socks on your feet that you made yourself. By the end of month 2, you will be looking at Victorian pattern books and picking your first non-sock project. By the end of month 3, you will wonder how you ever lived without this machine. The Victorians figured this out over 130 years ago. They published books about it. They advertised it in magazines. They made it accessible to anyone who could turn a crank and follow instructions. And then the world moved on, mass production took over, and this incredible tool became a curiosity, a collector's item, something people display on shelves rather than use. That is changing. 3D printed machines are bringing CSMs back into production. Online communities are sharing patterns and tutorials. The original Victorian pattern books are being digitized and circulated for free. A craft that nearly disappeared is coming back because people are discovering what those Victorian women already knew. Your first sock will be too big. Your second will be too small. Your third might fall apart. But your fourth and fifth will be on your feet and you will not want to take them off. And then you will look at that machine sitting on your table and you will understand exactly why. A woman in 1889 read an advertisement in a magazine and decided she absolutely had to have one. You are not starting from scratch. You are picking up exactly where she